Hello, hello. Mic testing 1, 2, 3. Open chat here. How is everyone doing? Oh, oopsie daisy. 1 second. There we go. How's everyone doing today? Oh, someone slides for today. Someone yesterday's notes. Perfect. Thank you. Hello, hello, hello. Mic testing 1, 2, 3. Hope you are doing well. Solutions to assignments. Great question. Okay, let's pause some audio here. All right. Hope you all are doing well. Assignment solutions is a good question, guys. Let's see what we can do about it. Well, I mean, there are textual solutions. I'm assuming what you want are video solutions. This means more offline videos. I will try, is all I can say. I am late and I do apologize. We will start in 2 minutes. Alrighty. Please release offline also opportunity of 200 so we can take this. Yeah. So few things in mind for me to do when I have bandwidth. Offline videos for the things that we are covering to make them a little bit easy to understand. Hope preferably like whatever's coming next week, I post a little bit earlier. Number one. Number two, GSOC. That's my second priority thing basically. After I've done all of this, I have time GSOC, and then if we get time, assignments might come at number 3. Cool. We'll wait until 7:04 and then we will start. Today's class के लिए slides are here. And that's pretty much it. Hopefully yesterday's class was okay-ish. But I will be releasing a few videos, like offline videos this week for the standard middlewares and databases. Probably SQL I'll cover in an offline video. And middleware is the thing that was slightly overwhelming. Also, offline video. I think we're at time here. So let's get into the slides. Link to the slides have been posted in the chat. They have a few links inside the slides. So there are a few like just links inside the slides. So feel free to download the slides on your side. It will be helpful. Let me share my screen as well. Almost forgot this. Alrighty. Cool, guys. Welcome to week 3.1. How's everyone doing? Not that the chat is open, the chat is closed, so I won't be able to read it. But hopefully you guys are doing fine. Today's class, we're going to discuss 3 things at a high level: fetch, authentication, and databases. Fetch basically represents how can you send HTTP requests from real websites. Until now, though, we have been using Postman and hitting the browser. How can you do the same thing from a website like ChatGPT when you click on a button? Number 1. Number 2, we'll understand authentication. The reason we want to understand authentication is because until now, again, we've built very kiddie projects where anyone can hit our endpoints. Need to fix that. For that, you need to understand how authentication is done in the real world. What this means is, log in with Google, log in with Facebook, things like these. Should check one thing. Sorry, 1 second. All right, good to go. And lastly, databases. Basically understand. Oh, CDC, going back. There you go. Databases. So we'll understand MongoDB today. We'll understand high-level differences between SQL, NoSQL, graph, vector databases. We'll pick up Mongo today. We'll try to finish an assignment that lets us, create a simple end-to-end project. By end-to-end, I mean our backend is up, our database is up, and we'll try our best to write some front-end code, even if we don't write it. We will cover that next week. All right. Let's get right into it. Let's begin with the fetch API. So until now, we have built a few HTTP servers. We have hit those HTTP servers either via Postman or via the browser. I'll go here and start hitting a specific, URL here that will send a GET request to an HTTP server. We haven't done this. When I'm on ChatGPT, chalo, ek to HTTP request went out. But when I am on this website and I try to write something here and I press a button, a request goes out to /conversation. This is what triggers the backend model to do something and respond back. How do they send this request? When a button is clicked is what we need to understand. Thankfully, the browser provides you a function to do this, which is again part of the JavaScript runtime, which means it was not supposed to be part of JavaScript. JavaScript only has functions, variables, strings, booleans, things like these. Whoever created browsers or the browser spec generally says कि हाँ 99.9% a website will need to hit other backend servers. A website will be very dynamic, and hence browsers expose a function called fetch, which, as the name suggests, lets you fetch data from the backend. Question is, how do you use this specific function? How do you give it an input? It should be a get request, a post request. How do you give it the body? Things like these. That we need to understand next. So that will be the first part of today's video. Until now, we have sent requests two ways, either using Postman or using the browser URL bar. There is a third way. Let's say I ask you to create an HTML page where number one, you can see the name of 10 people. Okay. Number two, you need to make sure that you get this data from an API call. What does this mean? I want you to create a simple HTML page. This is the HTML code that you will write. But this needs to hit a backend server that you don't have to write. Someone else has thankfully written this. There's a very free API that's available. We are just going to use that free API. The thing that you have to do is, given some front-end code, or like not given some front-end code, write some front-end code that hits this endpoint, gets back the data, and puts it here on the screen. Cool. Hopefully that's clear. Simple problem statement. What is the simplest way to do this? Okay, bhaiya, we don't have any backend only. We only have front-end code, and I will simply write 10 names there in HTML. You can do that. But what is the problem statement? Problem statement is, share my iPad here for a second. Never mind. Why isn't connected? Let's stay here itself. Problem statement is, write some HTML code that is able to hit a backend server. Thankfully, here is an HTTP server that you can hit. And these guys have exposed, a very nice JSON data that they give you back. If I right click on inspect, click on network, send the request again, you will see the response that comes back is an object which has data as a field, which has 10 different values. Data is an array. The first value has a person's address, name, image, gender, all these things. I need to create a HTML page that hits this API, similar to, when you're here and you click a button, a request goes out, response comes back, and something gets rendered. We need to do the same thing. All right. So go to Replit now, click on create REPL, and try to create a simple HTML, CSS, JavaScript page with me, where we will try to solve this problem to understand how the fetch API works. Again, we're not coding the backend. We are using someone else's backend to, just hit it on the front end, get back the data and respond to it. I'm going to clear this. You don't have to write this, by the way, like this is should be fairly simple. But if you want to, feel free to open Replit and code along with me. First thing you have to do, create a button. Get enable data. I've created a simple button. I have said button on click, call this function. Akirat, where is this function defined? We will define it very soon. But until we have defined it, this is the syntax in raw JavaScript to call a function whenever a button is clicked. Okay? Next step is actually defining the function. Create a script tag and write whatever JavaScript you want inside. I'm going to write function get animal data. And right now I'm going to do nothing. I'll just leave it like this. Oopsie daisy. And run it. I have this. Hopefully, clicking on this button is triggering this function. I can actually confirm that by putting an alert here. I click on it. I get an alert. This alert function lets you give native alerts in a browser, which is what I'm getting anytime I click on this button. So the control is definitely reaching here. Question is, how do I send a request to where? This URL. So let me post it in chat. So if you guys are trying this out, you're able to as well. Here I'm going to use the fetch function that I talked about. again, it is a function. It is supposed to do something. We don't have to get into how it does it. Under the hood, it's sending out a request, getting back a response, and giving you the response. Const, well, let's start slow. Const response equal to fetch of this thing, and let's log response. Harkirat, where have you mentioned if will this be a get request, a post request? Where have you sent body, header, query parameters? By default, any request that you send, this will send a get request by default. If you want to specify post request, there are ways. For example, you can add method post here that would change this request type to post when it's going out. But for now, we're just sending a get request. So this works. We don't have to send any data along with it. So this just works. And I'm logging response here. What do you think will happen when I log response? Click here and go to shell. Oh, right click, inspect console. There you go. So all the logs for this website, since this website is sort of rendered here only, you can see by right clicking on inspect and going to the console. If you go to the console, whatever you are logging will appear here. And as you can see, it says promise pending. Have we done this before? Fetch is an asynchronous call, right? It has to go via a bunch of wires through the internet, reach the server of faker.api.it, which is some very nice people who have given, free APIs to get back random user data. It has to do that. And when it comes back is when you actually get the data. So how do you get data from a promise? Have we written this syntax a few times now? The way to do that is fetch dot then function response. Yeah, bhai, whenever this promise resolves, whenever the data actually comes back, control should reach here. Harkirat, why not the callback approach? Why not this? I like this approach better. You might, but fetch, this might work actually. I mean, fetch may support callbacks as well. But if you know that something is returning a promise, why not use the cleaner promisified syntax for it? So for that reason, I'm using the cleaner promisified syntax. And now I get access to response. I can log this response object, but at a high level, I know what the shape of this looks like. So I'll just write down the final way to get this data that this API returns into a variable. Const response dot JSON dot then function. Now this will be a little overwhelming. Let me make it slightly easier. Let's see what response.json returns. We know that this guy returns you JSON data, right? Response.json lets you grab data in the JSON format. If you know that response is going to be of such a format, which in our case it is. But this in itself is an asynchronous function. If I do a const res equal to this, or const JSON equal to this, and try to log JSON, you will see if I click, is the console. If I click on this, let me clear the console. I click on this. Eventually it says promise pending, which means okay, this is also a promise, which means I need to await this as well. For that, again, there is the async await syntax we have talked about. I'm not showing that yet. I can just do this returns a promise. So I'm going to do this. Final data. And now I have access to the real final data. If I run this now, if I click here, you see what gets rendered. Status, okay, data, 10 elements. Basically, what is response or whatever, what is this final data that I've logged here? It is whatever this API returns. When I'm clicking on a button here, if you go to the networks tab, you will see a request is going out to faker api.it/api/p1/persons, and it is giving me back some JSON data. Similar to when I was on ChatGPT, I wrote something and clicked on this button. A request was going out to ChatGPT servers. So what have we done here? We have now become the front-end developer. We are not the back-end developer. Someone else has written all the back-end code. We have written the code to hit those back-end servers, get back the data, and log it on the screen. That much. The difficult bits here are, कि हाँ भाई, what is this dot then and dot then? Why are there two dot thens? So there are a few ways to write, fetch. This is one way. Another way, if you feel more comfortable in the async await syntax, you can actually write it like this. Async function is const response equal to await fetch. This one's much cleaner. Const final data equal to await response dot JSON. Then log. This and this both do the same thing. This is slightly cleaner syntax, as you can see, async await syntax. This is slightly harder. You can do it in some callback fashion as well. That's even easier, but that's much harder to read. Ideally, you want to write code like this from now on. Yeah, if you know there is an async call that needs to be made inside a function, make it an async function, and all the calls add await. All the async calls add await in front of it before getting the data. This works as well, but this is much cleaner. This comment this is enough for you to at least get data. I haven't yet rendered data on ChatGPT. If I go right and press enter, eventually the data that comes back gets rendered here, which means gets put here on the screen. I haven't yet done that. There is an easy way to do that. Let's not go into that just yet. For that, we will need to understand a little bit about this thing called the DOM. But it's very easy to, once you have this data, it's very easy to put it here so that, your users can actually see this data. You can also, or you don't have to have a call this function on a button click. You can also be like, yeah, bhai, anytime there is no button and anytime the page is loaded, I am going to call this function. That way, the user will simply see all the data here when they visit your website. They don't have to click on a button. It was just for comparing it to ChatGPT. I said, let's first create a button. Let's make a user click on it. And it shouldn't be animated. It should be like user data because we're just getting back user data. We click on it, hits an endpoint, gets back a data. Currently, it gets logged. In the next week, you will see how can you put this logged data here on the screen so that you can actually create a dynamic website. Cool. Let's do a quick poll before we proceed to authentication. This is just a high level fetch API that I wanted to cover before we proceed. How will front ends and backends eventually be connected using the fetch function call? Not good, not bad, somewhere in the middle. It's totally fine. It's 84% basically, which is not great, but let this be a disjoint thing, which we will cover at the end in doubts. If you don't understand the fetch API yet, anything that's coming after it, after this point, should be disjoint from it. So you will be fine either way. Okay, let's proceed. And then at 7:50, we will take a break when I'll take some doubts here. And then at the end of the class as well. Cool. This was the code base at a high level. This is this one line I had to add to actually render the animals here. Feel free to take a screenshot. We will understand this slightly better next week. And also here is a link to a gist in case you want to try this out on your side. If you try this out on your side, it might become slightly easier. Cool. Even if you don't understand it, it's fine. Let's move to authentication, which is the core thing you need to understand today. Databases can wait, fetch can wait. Authentication is key. Let's understand, how do you build an authenticated website? How do you build something like facebook.com where someone comes, puts in username, password, and all their data they get back from the backend server? Project for today. Let people sign up to your website. Allow only signed in users to see a list of users from your backend. Basically, we want to create a website similar to this or an API similar to this faker api.it/api/persons, but we want to restrict who can access this. We want to create a platform on top. Okay, bhaiya, we have this list of users. We will only give it to you if you are signed in, which means whoever is creating the front end for it will first have to create a username password field. Someone will have to put in their details, click on the submit button, and only then will they see all of this fake data. So, at a high level, that is the project we want to build today. And for that, we need to understand how do you take username password as input? How do you do authentication? Things like these. Okay. Before we reach the project, let's understand what is authentication. I hope a few of you users have seen the Facebook sign up page or any sign in page for that matter. Almost all websites have authentication. There are complicated ways to do authentication. Log in with Google, log in with Facebook, log in with LinkedIn. There are easy ways. Easiest way is this username password based approach. Ki, user will give you a username and password. You sign them up once, and every time they're on a new machine, they're on their mobile phone, they have to put the email and the password, click on login. Something happens when they click on login. So that after that, all their future requests are authenticated until they click on the logout button. So how do you build something like this is what we want to discuss next. Cool. All right. Before we get into authentication, we need to understand 4 things. Cool. So let's disjoint from authentication some small computer science concepts that are good to know. Even if you don't understand first and second, it's fine. I mean, even if you understand them from the high level, it's fine because you won't use encryption and hashing for a long time. The third one is important, JSON web tokens. Logo storage also, if you don't understand, it is fine. Okay, let's go through the whiteboard to understand these because they're mildly hard concepts to digest. Some of you might have done it in your, cryptography course if you have that in college. All right. 4 things we need to talk about. If my iPad works. Okay, there we go. Number 1. Let's understand hashing. Let me give you a real world example. Let's say you go to facebook.com. You put in your username here. You put in your password here. It hits a backend database. Sorry, it hits a backend, which stores this password somewhere, right? This password is present somewhere in some usually database, which we will get to what they are, but a centralized place where all this username password information is dumped. Do you think if your password is 123, let's say, or whatever your password is, I love Kiara, let's say, okay, you are a naughty person, you have such a weird password. Do you think this password gets stored as such in plain text here in the Facebook database? Or do you think something random happens here? Is it converted into some other format? Some gibberish, 1, 2, 3 random before it gets stored? And the answer is it does get converted into some gibberish before it gets stored. Question is, why, Harkirat? Why do you hash passwords before you actually store them in the database? There are multiple reasons for this. Biggest reason is if there is a database out there and I store this password as such, people repeat passwords. Whatever password you have on Google, there is a good chance you have it on Facebook. There's a good chance you have it on some other website. So it is standard practice for any backend developer puts a password in a database, they hash it, they convert it into some weird format. But there are some constraints on this format. Okay, bhai, anytime I love Kiara is converted to this format, it gives the same output. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि हाँ, I called a hash function on this. The first time it gave me this hash. I called it again some other time, it gave me another hash. No. A single input will always give the same output. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Output might be, A, B, C, D, 1, 3, 2, random, some long gibberish string. This will always give you this output. And this is what gets stored in the database. The reason number 1, I said, Mark Zuckerberg shouldn't be able to, look into this database and see, "Acha, Harkirat has used this password, so he loves Kiara. He'll know my secrets, right?" For that reason, this is always converted into a hash. Another reason is if this database is ever breached, then also whoever the hackers that have breached it, they'll be able to see, "Acha, Harkirat at gmail.com is a user here." But they won't be able to read my password again because it will be hashed. So what is hashing? Converting a simple string into some complicated gibberish such that anytime that single string is converted into the is sent into this hash function, gets converted into the same gibberish, is called hashing. You can never guess कि हाँ, this person's password was this just by looking at the hash. And you can never, no one, even Facebook's developers, even Mark Zuckerberg, can never decrypt this back to password. They only know this. This is what gets stored in the database. You might ask, Harkirat, so you are saying this is Facebook ka backend server, this is Facebook database, and this database has username Harkirat at gmail.com and password is some random gibberish, one to random. Then how does, whenever I send a login request here with my name, which is, Harkirat at gmail.com, and my real password, 123 random, how does the backend server validate कि हाँ, this password is the same as this gibberish? And the answer is the backend server reconverts it into the gibberish and then compares this gibberish with whatever is present in the database. This is how you build real authentication systems. Okay, when the user signs up, they send you their username and password. You store in a database their username as such and their hashed password, which means some gibberish. Whenever they send future requests to sign in, you first in memory in the backend server in your Node.js code, convert this password that they've sent into the hash, and then you compare this hash with the database to check whether or not this person has the right credentials that they're logging in with. Cool. That is hashing. What have we learned? Hashing. What is the property of it? It is one way. You can only convert a string to a hash. You can never convert the hash back to a string. You don't know. There's a lot of noise that's added on it. You can never convert, given a hash, you can never tell what the original string was. But there is another thing called encryption. This is two-way. The same thing. Everything is the same. You have some string on the left, which gets converted to sub gibberish. But you can always convert the gibberish back to the original string, provided you have a key. It's like locking something. Someone gave you a string, you logged it with a key, which could is also some string, 123 random, or some admin password, whatever, very secret string. This is something, if let's say Facebook encrypted any of your data, which they do. For example, images is a very common use case. Whenever you upload your image or video onto a Facebook database, it doesn't get stored as such in their, some store database, wherever they put your MP4 files. It gets encrypted first, and then encrypted thing gets pasted here. But if you ever fetch that, then it first gets decrypted before it's sent back to you. So encryption, the only difference, well, one of the biggest difference between encryption and hashing is that encryption is two-way, hashing is one way. Hashing does not really require a password. Encryption does require a password. Whoever has this password, if they see a encrypted string, they can decrypt it. Here, once it is converted, no one can, just looking at the output, convert it back into the hash. Cool. Do we understand encryption and hash? Very theoretical computer science second year cryptography concepts. Not really needed. The third thing we do need, JSON web tokens, but encryption and decryption and hashing alike. Even if you don't know them, it's okay, okay. Not great, but okay, okay. Okay, great. Cool. So encryption, decryption are clear. Let's move on to the third thing. JSON, web, tokens. Wow, it has three words in one. Let's try to break down all three. Number one, JSON. What does this mean? Okay, bhaiya, this is also some encryption, some hashing function, but it only works for JSON input. Yeah, it will take some JSON as an input, name Harkirat, and give you some, not exactly gibberish. It gives you some more structured data, but high level, it gives you a very long string. There is actually some format to the string. It has 3 parts, yada yada. But in the end, you look at it, you can't tell, what. Well, you can sort of tell. It gives you a long string, but it is significantly different from, um, you know, hashing and encryption. We will see how. But what is the difference? The first difference is it takes a JSON as an input. Second difference is, the second thing here is web. I have no idea why they put web here, most probably because you use this on the web and it was introduced as a use case for web. I guess that's it. Token. Third thing is important. कि हाँ भाई, it takes this and creates a token at the end. The long string it gives you is called a token. Why, Harkirat? Because JWT. There is one very weird thing about, this sort of, call it encryption, call it hashing. And the weird thing is कि हाँ भाई, you give it an input, it will give you an output. Whoever has this output can actually see the input. It is not, hashed in some way. It is not protected in any way. It is just converting a complex object into a long string. You might ask, Akira, then what is even the purpose of doing this? Great question. I don't know. People who created it in a way that this can still be, anyone who has this string can actually look at what the contents of this are, what were the original contents. Let me give you a very quick example here, and let me compromise my ChatGPT security here for you guys. If I go to chat.openai.com, yesterday I told you, okay, हाँ भाई, there is one thing here which if you get access to, I am pretty much screwed because you can use my ChatGPT account. Let me show you what that thing was. If I post something, I click on enter. I said here, if you look at headers, you will see a few things. And one of those things is this authorization header. It says bearer spaced a very long string. This very long string is actually a JWT. And I can just copy this very long thing, go to jwt.io, and you can as well. Like you can take your JSON web tokens and just paste them here. Let me paste my ChatGPT token here, sort of partially, so you guys can not totally see it, but a little bit see it. There you go. I pasted it here, and what do I see at the right? The original thing that was hashed, the original JSON that was hashed. It is, how can I hide that? No, wait. It is basically this. So when I sign in on ChatGPT, they take, they create a very complex object and give me back that. Converted into a single string, which is this JSON right here. Sorry, this JWT right here. So what is JWT? Again, it is some input. See, Daisy, some input converted into an output, but anyone who has this output can actually see the input. Sounds very weird and counterintuitive. Why would you even do this if whoever can look at this can actually figure out what the thing here is? But bear with me for some time. We will see eventually. Okay. So that's what a JWT is. It looks something like this. As I said, it has 3 parts: this first red part, second purple part, and third blue part. But high level, it is a very long string, and it hashes slash it not protects, like compresses somehow some big data. This big data you can convert into a JWT. This JWT you can convert back here. But conversion anyone can do. But there's something called verification that only ChatGPT servers can do. Let me show you on the iPad. So I said, very complex object. You pass it through some function, jwt.encode. You give it a password here as well, which only in case of ChatGPT, only Sam Altman knows, or is present in their database, in their backend somewhere, which could be something like 123 RP, some secret. And this converts it into a very long string, which, as I showed you, that string has 3 parts. This string anyone can decode, but only this guy can verify कि हाँ भाई, given this string and given this password, you can pass it through a verification function jwt.verify, and it will only return you, the original data if this password is the thing that was used to hash the original thing. Battery is running out, but okay. Let me first finish the iPad thingy. I have some JSON data here. I take a password. I pass this JSON data into a function jwt.encode. I get back a string. If I take the string and pass it through another function called jwt.verify, I need to pass in my password as well. And only then will I get the original output. So what ChatGPT's servers do is that anytime I send them a request, for example, /conversation, and I send, as you saw, I send them a JWT along. On their server, they run jwt.verify, the long string that I sent, comma, the password that they use to hash it. And from this, not verify. And from this, they get back the original object and they figure out, Acha, this is Harkirat. And then they, let me access certain things, don't let me access other things. That is what JSON web tokens are. High level, very similar to encryption, decryption. This is encryption. This is JWT. Goes through a function. Some data goes through some function, gives you back a string. Some JSON goes through a function, gives you back a string. This string can be decoded by anyone. This string can only be decoded by the person who has this password. But this string can only be verified by whoever has this password. What does verification mean? It's just that, bhai, on this backend server, I will check my password and this string. Can I get back this from it using both of these? And if the answer is yes, then verification succeeds. Verification, you can think of anyone can decode, but whoever wants to verify needs this password, which is why the backend server will always verify. On the ChatGPT backend server, you will never see the code written jwt.decode because decode doesn't require the password. You will always see the code written jwt.verify because this will only return true if this password is correct, else it will return you false or, tell you this user isn't logged in. Cool. iPad is about to run, sorry, my Mac is about to run out of battery. So let me move back here, put back my charger. All right. So three things, hopefully we have learned until now: hashing, encryption, and JSON web tokens. Let's do a quick recap. Hashing, given an input could be anything. For example, my username and my password, some string can be converted into some hash. Hashing is one directional. Given the output, no one can figure out the input. Hashing is one way. Given the output, no one can figure out. Changing the input a little bit changes the output by a lot. So ये just standard property of hashing है कि if you look at the input here, it's harkirat@gmail.com 1 2 3 4 5 6. Look at the output. I just added a 1 at the end and the output changed drastically. The reason for saying this is that you cannot change the output a little bit and the input changes a little bit. The input changes by just one digit, output changes by completely. So you can never guess what the input was by changing some inputs here. If I know the hash of this thing is this, I cannot guess let me put a 1 at the end here, that will put a 1 at the end because they change significantly. That's why the last property of hashing is sort of popularized this way. Encryption, it is two-way. Given the input, convert into a gibberish. Given the output, can convert back as long as I have the password. JSON web tokens. It's neither of encryption and hashing. It is actually something called creating a digital signature. Anyone can see it. A signature, when you do on a check, anyone can see it, right? I can see it, you can see it. But only the bank can verify it by, taking the check, looking at the signature and comparing it with something else. So it is sort of a digital signature. Anyone can see it, but only the bank or, some person can verify it, the person who has this password. But still at a high level, looks something like this. You encrypt something, get a signature. You can always decrypt the signature as long as you have the password. Anyone can see the original output given the signature. Signature can only be verified by using the password. And this password is something you don't want to expose, basically. So this password only ChatGPT backend servers have. They don't expose this on the front end or on their client. This is present on their server, usually, whoever. There are places where these secrets are stored. That's where this specific secret will be stored as well. local storage. So this is yeah, this is sort of important. Question remains कि हाँ, when I go to whatever facebook.com and I sign in, hopefully you guys can little get कि हाँ, when you sign in is when you get back a JSON web token. Same for chat.openai.com. On chat.openai.com, right now I'm sending any request I send, I am sending back this token. But when did I get this token? I probably got this token when I signed up, when I went to chat.openai.com and signed in with my username or Google, whatever, clicked on login here, actually signed in, is when the backend returned me the token. Question is that token string, how is it being relayed back in every request? Where is this token stored? And the answer here is there are a few places you can store it, but one such place is called applications, local storage. This. If I click here, you will see a few things. One of those things might be this header. And anytime I actually sign in, they give me back a token. I store it here. What is the point of this local storage? It is, bhai, this is your browser's local storage. Even if I close this and I come back, even if I restart my machine, this token will remain here. And so the front end can always, relay back this token in every request. Whoever has written the front end code, whenever they send this, fetch request to /conversation, when they're, when I click on the button, they send this header somehow. Headers, authorization, local storage dot read token, something like that. Okay. Now that this token is stored, the front-end developers have a code written like this, have the code that they've written is like this. Okay, any request that's going out will carry this token along. And when I log out here, if I ever, go to profile and log out, they just remove this token from the local storage, and then I'm not sending back anything. So I'm no longer logged. That's a high level of one way of doing authentication. There are other ways like cookies, which we will get to eventually. But this is the local storage way of doing authentication, which is someone goes to your sign up page, they say two input boxes and a submit button. They send a request with their username, password to your backend. Your backend, as I said, first converts this password into a hash, then checks from the database ki, haan bhai, are these credentials correct? And if they are, returns back a JWT. The backend creates the JWT and returns it back. When the client gets this JWT, it stores it in the browser. It does a local storage dot set token, comma, whatever it got back here. And this gets stored in the browser almost forever only. Ki, haan bhai, until the user logs out and we actually clear this is going to stay in the browser. Now, any subsequent request that goes out from chat.openai.com to the ChatGPT servers, the front-end developers have written the logic, bhai, I will pick up this token and send it across. This way, the user doesn't have to, always send their username password along to identify themselves. They just send the JWT, and the backend can always verify in every request, ki, haan, bhai, is this JWT correct? Is this JWT correct? And if it is, it lets the user access the set of resources that they have privilege on. If this JWT is incorrect or the user logged out, then the backend will just block them. Ki, haan, bhai, you are no longer allowed inside. That's a high level of how to do authentication in the real world. Let's get to an assignment to actually solve it. But before that, happy to take a pause here at 7:45. Let's see, keynotes, authentication. There we go. This is the assignment for today. Happy to take a break at this point, but let's read through the assignment first. It says, let's start by creating an assignment for today. A website that has two endpoints. Number one, /signin. Send a post request here, username, password, returns a JSON web token with the username encrypted. Just the username, not the password. You not encrypted, like, tokenized. You don't want to return the user back a JWT with their password, because that means, as I said, anyone can decode their JWT. So can lead to leakage of passwords. So return a JSON web token with just their username encrypted. And another endpoint called get/users, which takes an authorization header as an input, expects the user to send back this JWT, and returns an array of all the users if the user is signed in, which means the token is incorrect. Returns a 403 status code if not. Okay? We have to create a backend that exposes these two endpoints. Here is the gist to start you off. I'll just open it in Replit and then do a pause, and then we can restart at 8. But high level, this is the code base. Let me actually explain this a little bit, and then we'll do a pause. Let me also paste the gist in chat. 1 second. Node.js create. Okay. Chat. Paste. There we go. All right. So I would urge you all to open this gist, open Replit and paste the code here. Going to give you guys a minute. At 7:48, in 1 minute, I will explain the assignment. And then we will take a break at 7:50, restart at 8. To all college students, this is your cue to go and have dinner. You can always come back and, paste this later on. 1 minute. So you guys have 40 more seconds, I think. All you have to do is just copy the gist and paste it over to a Replit. So we can finish the assignment. It's partially done. We finish the rest of it. All right, 7:48. The assignment says there is a list of in-memory users. We are not using databases yet. So their username, password, and first name are just stored in memory in an array. Okay? Now that you have this, you have to expose two endpoints, /signin and /users. This will be a post request where user will send you their username and password in the body. You have to finish the implementation of this function called user exists, which will check, is this a valid user? Do we have someone with this username and password? And if yes, then you return true, else you return false. You have to return it from this all users array. If they don't exist, what will you do? You will tell them this user does not exist in our memory. This is what Facebook would do if I would send a wrong username and password, right? Same thing. If they don't, then I do jwt.sign. This is the function that is encrypting, tokenizing this input given this password. So this is a wrong password. Should probably be this JWT password I've defined at the top. Either way, we can fix that. This creates the token. This takes this as an input, some JSON as an input, converts it into a very long string, and we return it back to the user. The user then has to store it in local storage, all that jazz. And then the get request, where we first verify the token that they sent us in the header, is that valid? If that is not valid, this will throw an exception, which is why the control will reach here. The catch, we will understand try catch very soon, but high level, we just have to do some more implementation here, very basic stuff. High level should be straightforward, but it's 7:50, so I'll give a break. Any questions related to, the two things we have learned today, which is the fetch API and authentication. Authentication may four things we have learned: encryption, hashing, JWTs, and local storage. Important things from today are fetch, JWTs, and local storage. Any questions related to this? Going to open chat for 10 minutes, and then we will proceed. All college students, please go to mess. All right. Lot of questions. What is RSA 256? Is it written here somewhere? They are just encryption algorithms. So there are a few ways you can encrypt AES 256, RSA 256, AES 128, I think, sorry. Won't get into that, don't need that for a while. Code won't run on local machine. Ask TS. Why do password leak if hashes are there? Oh, well, you could just database, your employees could look at your database, they have access to it, right? So if Mark Zuckerberg doesn't want कि कोई random Facebook employee looks at the database, finds out कि Harkirat's password is I love Kiara, and then goes to my Facebook and goes to my whatever chat GPT and logs in with harkirat96 at gmail.com because he knows my email and I love Kiara because I've reused the password. So that's why. Why JWT is a good question. कि हाँ भाई, why are we using JWT for authentication? Why not encryption? Why not something else? It's just the common standard for doing it. This, तो यार देखो, high level इसका reason है वैसे. The reason for this is this saves you a database call anytime you're verifying the user. So when the user sends you the token, you verify it in memory and then you just proceed. Versus if the token was somehow कि हाँ the username and password are hashed, you'd get it back, you'd get the username password, you hit the database, or you create some other ad hoc way to you have your own sessions table, store things there. This is just the easiest, the fastest, more specifically like the most adopted way to do encryption decryption when it comes to web APIs. Explain the assignment code again. I will at 7:59. What if token some catch? Then what will you do? What if token? Oh, if someone has your token, you're screwed. That is why I was saying, if you have my ChatGPT token that I was showing you, they can basically log in as you. That's it. It's like they have your username and password. So let's recap fetch. A few people are asking that. Okay, bhai, let's recap fetch. Let me open the REPL. Oh, I don't have it. The hell? Where can I see my history? My REPL folder. There we go. So this was the code that I wrote for fetch. I said, ignore this. Okay, I want you to button. Write some code. Okay, user data. It's actually not. User data. I said, I want you to write some code. Ki haan, by any time the user clicks on this button, you hit this endpoint, which returns you, oh, see daisy. There you go. Which hits this endpoint and gives you back the data, you render it here. So for that, I said, fetch is one way to do it. On your front end, if you want, once the front end is loaded, under the hood, a request goes, similar to ChatGPT. The front end came the first time. So when I put something, I clicked on a button. When I click on a button, the request goes out. How can we create something similar? Like this. I create a button. I said anytime this button is clicked, call get user data. And here I say const response equal to await fetch the endpoint that I want to send the request on, and some headers if I want to send. We don't actually have to send any headers here. So basically this await fetch this. Final data, the actual data to get is await response.json. Now, why Harkirat? Why this? Great question. There are actually other libraries that make it slightly easier and like have a cleaner syntax. Axios is one of them that lets you just, in a single call gives you back the JSON. But the fetch API expects that, bhai, if you are expecting the JSON data, then call this function. And this is an asynchronous function, so wait on it. And that's how you get the final data. I just log it here. I can actually put it here if I want. I can quickly show you how to do that. Div ID equal to user data. That's div. And I can just write here document.get element by ID user data dot inner HTML equal to final data. If I write these two lines of code, now how they work under the hood, we will see next week. But if I write just do these two lines of code with the code that I had already written, if I click on this, you will see object gets put here. If I put a JSON.stringify here, which actually converts this JSON into a string, and then click on get user data, you will see the whole thing got rendered here. This is similar to ChatGPT, right? I put something here, I click on a button, an HTTP call goes out, gives me a response, response gets rendered here. Similarly, here also something similar is happening. Okay, you click on a button, request goes out under the hood, gives you back the response, you decode the response, then you say, okay, haan, bhai, I'm going to render the response here, which I just did. I still have the button, but the data is present above it. Cool. That's the high level of this fetch function. What is parse and safe parse? That's from Zod from yesterday. It's if you want to throw an exception, you call parse. If you want to not throw an exception, but just returns success true or success false, you use safe parse. I will explain the assignment very soon. If password is hash encrypted, what is the purpose of adding capital letters, numbers, passwords? Oh, it's just to, oh, that is for something else. When someone asks you, okay, haan, bhai, your password should have at least 8 letters, and two uppercase, one lowercase at least, and one number. The reason for that is so that it's slightly more random, because another attack vector on passwords is all common words are very easy to guess. So for that reason, when you use all of these, your password will be slightly less guessable. That's the other reason. It's not encryption, like hashing is for a different use case. This is for a different use, so just to make it slightly more safer. So hashing and encryption may high level. The difference is hashing is one way. Encryption is two-way. Encryption has the concept of decryption. Encryption, hashing where you can never convert back the hash to the normal original string. Where to store key in encryption, decryption? Oh, it's, well, in the real world, all of these secrets, be it your MongoDB URL, be it your, these JWT keys, these encryption keys are stored in some, secret place. Now, some people store it in GitHub secrets. Some people store it. AWS has its something called secrets manager. Some people have it in their Kubernetes pipeline in secrets. So it really depends on how you've deployed. But high level, you want to know the answer today. GitHub secret is the best place to put it. Could you please repeat token hashing encryption cookie relationship process? What is the JSON data of the password verification? Why do response.json? Oh, why do we do response.json? Because that's how the fetch API was written. It was written by very old grumpy people who said, okay, yaar, we don't know, data could be anything else. It could be JSON, it could be text. So you tell me, is the final data text, or is it JSON, or is it binary? And based on that, I will decrypt it back to the data. That's just how the original maintainers of fetch wrote it. That is why libraries like Axios are much more popular, because they just let you do the same thing in a single call. If you use the Axios library, if you import it at the top, you can simply do axios.get this thing, and it'll give you back the data, like the JSON data in this response object. You can do response.data, it'll give you the JSON. You don't have to do this extra function. This is just how fetch is written, unfortunately. I will explain the assignment very soon again, don't worry. Replit is down. All right, 7:59. Let me also breathe here, and let's start back at 8. To actually code a bit, if you don't understand a few things, fine. Code, actually write this specific code and make sure you understand this, then you're sorted. If we don't understand this code, then we have a problem. Okay. Replit might be down, actually, I don't know. We will see. If it is down, we'll figure it out. Eight PM. Let's look at the assignment one more time. I pretty much completed the code base for something like this, but I still want you guys to code some parts which are actually not related to the new things we're learning. It's related to the past things we've already learned. So hopefully you're able to code that. If not, that's fine as well. You can just follow along with me. But at a high level, what is the assignment? Let's go back to the slides here. Let's start by creating our assignment for today. A website which has two endpoints, a post endpoint and a get endpoint. What is the post endpoint? Okay, by any time a request comes to /signin, this is the route. This is the body that is expected. Okay, the user who's sending the post request needs to send a username and password along. Return a JSON web token with the username encrypted, not the password. Just create a fresh object with username and return it encrypted, provided this user actually exists in your in-memory database. What is an in-memory database? We will see very soon. Get, the other request that you have to do is get/users. This expects an authorization header. What is an authorization header? The same thing that ChatGPT expects here. If I go to chat.openai.com, send a request, amongst the 100 headers that it sends, one of the headers that actually does the authentication is this authorization header. So our endpoint is also, as good as ChatGPT, expects this authorization header from the user anytime they're sending a request to the second endpoint, which is get/users. If they are correctly authorized, which means the token is actually correct, then we return an array of all users if the user is signed in. If they are not signed in, if their token is not verified on the backend, then we return a 403 status code. Okay? This is the assignment for today. Let's look at the 90% of the code that I've already written. 10% you have to write. Look at the 90% of the code. I import Express. I import a new library here called JSON Web Tokens. So now I've introduced a new library, which you can always Google. What does this do? Just Google JSON Web Token NPM. It'll take you to this page. What does it say? It is an implementation of JSON Web Tokens. So JSON Web Tokens, just like HTTP is a spec, JSON Web Tokens is a spec by IETF, the organization that creates the JavaScript ECMAScript standard, may not have created the HTTP standard, but they have created this specific JSON Web Token standard. Okay, bhai, this is the best way to do JWT authentication. And one library has an implementation of this spec, similar to how like SpiderMonkey or V8 are implementations of the ECMAScript standard. They actually implement converting JavaScript code into zeros and ones. This actually implements the JWT standard. It gives you a bunch of functions. You can read through this if you want, but at a high level, the functions that we need are encoding it and verifying it. These two things, right? The first function to convert the JSON into a string. Second function to verify, is this string for a user or is this a random string? So for that, I imported this library. I create a JWT password. What is this password? The thing that I showed you here. JWTs require a password. Whenever you're encrypting something or decrypting something, there is a password on the server, and only who has this password can actually verify the signature. If you don't have this password, you're pretty much screwed. So that is that password. For my server, it is 123456. Usually this will be something more secret that's stored in some secrets manager. But for now, we just have it here in the backend Node.js code. Const app equal to express. We've done this many times. An in-memory database. What is an in-memory database? Basically a variable where you say, my website has 3 users. I don't have a sign-up procedure. I have just put in 3 random users. If someone with this username and password tries to log in, they are good. Good. Any other random username password, I will not allow. Okay, it's just until we understand databases, you just put them in memory. Lastly, I have a function which we have to eventually write the logic for. But I say, anytime a post request comes to /signin, this is the post request that I expected here in the slides. What did I say in the slides? I said 2 endpoints you have to create. The first one is post to /signin. This endpoint here is the implementation. I will get the username and password. I need to check, is this user actually valid? Does this username and password actually exist in one of these 3? So that is the logic we have to write here. And once we've written that logic, the rest of this function is pretty much done. If the user doesn't exist, return a 403. Else, jwt.sign. So this is the function that will actually take this as an input, delete this, whatever jwt password as the input, the thing that I defined here at the top, and actually get back the token and return the token to the end user. Now it's the responsibility of the end user to actually store it in local storage, send it back in every other request, things like these. Okay? I've written it completely. You have to write this function. Okay? I'm going to give you guys 1 minute to figure out this function. I'm going to write it on my side here. You write it on your side here, and then we will compare, match, whatever. What does it have to do? Write logic to return true or false if the user exists in this array. So you have to check the username and password. Okay? Write this code. I'm going to write it as well. So I have written this code base again. If you don't have the gist, by the way, let me just repost it. Posted it in chat, so you can copy the code from here. What have I written? User does not exist. Let me iterate. Even if one of them matches, I will say user exists is true and then return back user exists. So this function does what is expected. There's a cleaner way to do it using find, something that JavaScript arrays have a function. Feel free to try it later on. But this implementation works as well. We have done the first part. Feel free to take a screenshot, marinate for the next 30 seconds, how this is doing what it is doing. But hopefully it's a straightforward syntax of iterating over all the users, doing the matches. And even if you find one match, then user exists is true. But by default, it is false, which means if the control never reaches here, then though it will be false, else it will become true. And that's what we return here. And then rest of the logic we have already written. Okay? Feel free to look at it. 15 more seconds. Then we will proceed to the second to do. All right. The second to do is, okay, bhai, this endpoint does what it is expected to do. Let's try it out. Let's just forget about the second to do. Let's try this endpoint out and see if it works. Okay, I'm going to click on run here. If we're all doing this together, most probably the applet is not going to work, but we'll see. Yep, as expected. So I'm going to move this code base locally. You don't have to. But yeah, I think it's just take a lot of time. So Visual Studio, oh, never mind. Spoke too soon, just worked. All right, seems to work. My HTTP server is up. Let me go and send a request to the endpoint that I've written /sign in. And let me send some random gibberish username and password. Oh, what did I forget? I hope you guys were able to figure it out. I forgot app.use express.json. So you should write it as well. Else, it won't be able to decode the body. Done it a few times. So hopefully it's straightforward. All right, we send it. And it says user doesn't exist in our in-memory database, which means control is reaching here correctly. Now let me send a right username and password. Assignment to a constant variable. Let's make it let. Now, if I send it, do I get back a token? Seems like I do. So is our authentication working as expected? Have we created a sign-in route that someone can come to a pretty page which has a username field, a password field, and a button? Click on a button. This request would go out and give them back the token. This token they should store in their local storage. Have we created this first endpoint? Seems like it. Let's copy this JSON web token. Go to jwt.io and paste it here. What does it say? Username harkirat@gmail.com. Some extra field, ignore that extra field. But did you see username harkirat@gmail.com? What did I encrypt slash, sign it with? I said username. So have we done the first part? Yes, we have created a token that the user should now send us back in any subsequent request. What is our other subsequent request here? It is this one. So let's look at ISKI implementation. What does it expect? It says const token equal to this. So it expects a token in the headers. Haan bhai, whatever JWT I return to you here, if you want to access this, send me that in your authorization header. Store it in token. And then what does it do? Const decoded equal to jwt.verify. We have used two functions from JWT, the library here. Number one, jwt.sign. Number two, jwt.verify. It gives you 10 different things, but these are the important functions you need to work with for now. What will this function do? Take the token as an input, take the JWT password as an input and return you back something if this token, is a valid token and can be passed using this password. If not, this will throw an exception, which is why I've put it inside a try catch block, which if you don't understand it, it's mostly fine. I can actually remove this if you want. Let's remove it. But I can cover this in an offline video. But basically, a way to catch errors is you wrap it inside a try catch, which means try running this code. If there is an exception, then don't error out. Don't, forward this to the error middleware that we discussed yesterday. Just reach the catch. Don't panic. So it's just a way to catch errors whenever they are thrown. And we know verify will throw an error if this token is not of the right format. For that reason, I wrap it inside. If you don't understand it, it's fine. I'll just remove it. Okay. And what is written at the end? We will verify. If this verification fails, the server will, return an exception to the user because this throws an error. But if the verification succeeds, you get back decoded. From decoded, what is decoded? This is the original JSON object, which will have these two fields, the username field and the IAT field. Ignore the IAT field. But I can get back the username and then I can just return the user. A list of in-memory users. Ideally, you'd want to return the user, everyone but themselves. So, that was the assignment for here. Yeah, don't return them everything. Return them everyone minus themselves. So that is the code that we have to write. Let's first run this much and then we can write that. It's fairly straightforward. All right. Send the sign-in request. Get back a token. Copy the token. Send the /users request, which is a GET request. And what do I need to send in the headers? I need to send a authorization header, which I'll just paste the string as such. On ChatGPT, it looks something like this. Bearer space this. In our use case, we say, "Bhai, just give it to us as such." You don't have to write bearer in front of it. What is bearer? We'll get to it. Don't you worry about it. Okay. Let me send this request. It gives me back all the users. Let me not send the authorization header. It gives me back an exception because an exception is thrown here. As you can see, JSON web token error, invalid token. So there was an exception thrown here, which is why I did not get what I wanted. If I had the try catch block, this would have been a slightly cleaner error message, but this is fine as well. High level thing is, if you send the right authorization header, you are sorted. But if you send the wrong authorization header or don't send it, if I send some gibberish here, then it will not give me the right error. Even if I send the right thing, but I change the password here from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to something new, then this password can no longer verify my original JWT. So now this will also fail. Failed. Cool. That's a high level of how you fix this. The only thing that is left is how can you return the user everyone but themselves. So for that, you can use filter, which we have discussed a few times. Filter function value if value dot username name and false. You don't have to understand this part. You can do an ad hoc, for loop about this that solves it. But until now we have discussed filter, so you should understand this. If you don't understand this, you've missed the filter video or you have not, practiced enough. So restart, send the request, and I get back Raman and Priya now. As you can see, I only get back 2 users because I filtered. Okay, bhai, I only need the people who don't have the username that I have. So now we have created sort of a real world backend, which has authentication in place. It has a sign-in endpoint. It has another endpoint that does something. It does not matter what the application logic is, but high level, it is authenticated. No one can access this code base until they send us the right JWT. And what did we use for this? We used the JWT library, which gives you a bunch of functions. Common ones we used, one to sign it, one to verify it. Okay. I'm going to copy this code, give it to you in a gist. I would urge you to, don't try to run it locally. Try to run it locally. Don't try to run it on Replit because it most probably, the hell happened here. It most probably, break Replit or something. Cool. All right, that's the code base. Oh, I can just share this. That's so cool. Okay, I was sharing just for no reason. Here is another link that lets you see the code base that we just wrote. And it's a decent way to solve this problem. Okay, let's do a poll. Pretty much done with authentication, the bits that we need. Now we'll move on to databases. But before that, let's do a quick poll. How are we doing? Oh, doing okay. Not great. So, uh, 73%. Let me take questions for 7 minutes. We will restart. Or let me complete databases and then doubts at the end. How's that? That's probably better because the people who understand can just proceed to databases, figure things out, and then go. And then we'll have a lesser, smaller crowd with which you can go through this and other things. Okay. Let me store this somewhere so we can come back to it at the end. I will try to finish databases by 8:45, and then let's do some questions. Okay. Even if you don't understand, it's fine. We'll do doubts later on. Authentication is done. Quick recap. JWT is to create tokens. User gets back a token after signing in. User sends back the token in all authenticated requests. Cool. High level. Okay. We'll proceed. Databases. Now comes the bit where we actually do some, real coding. Until now, we've built very kiddie projects. The reason for that is we have not introduced databases yet. We have had this in-memory object where we just hard code all the users. We don't let new users sign up. We don't let users delete themselves or leave the platform if they want. We say by hard code kar diya. This is hard coded. Whoever is part of this list, cool. If you're not, we can't help you. Hai na? Until now, we've stored data in memory. This is a bad for a few reasons. Data can't be dynamic. If you update in-memory objects, the updates are lost if the process restarts. So basically, you can still, be like, okay, I will have in-memory object. I will expose a sign-up endpoint. Anytime someone signs up, I will add something here. Anytime someone says I want to delete my project or my user, I will delete from this in-memory object. The problem here is if your process ever crashes, then all those updates are lost, right? I can't create an in-memory object. If I start this right now, this in-memory object is hard coded as this. If during the execution of the program, more things get added here, more things get removed from here. If the program crashes, then all of these updates are lost. And I am back at square one with the original users. For that reason, in-memory objects are a big no-no. And there is another big reason for which you shouldn't have in-memory objects. You should use databases, which what they are, we will come to. But at a high level, in the real world, you don't have, let's see, you don't have a single backend server. Okay, by single backend server, any browser, please send a request to this backend server and I will respond back. No. In the real world, you have multiple backend servers. You actually have a cluster and this is your client. So you cannot be like, yahan pe in-memory object is there, yahan pe in-memory object is there. And if a new user signs in, you update it here or signs up, you update it here, but you don't update it here. And if this crashes, those updates are gone. So for that reason, in the real world, you will always see there is a backend server. This is your browser. There is a database behind it. And there could be multiple backend servers. That is fine. Database usually, there is a single database. It can still be, be distributed, which means there can be multiple machines that are running it, but they're synced very well with each other for all practical purposes. For the first part of this cohort, assume there is literally a single machine out there which is supposed to store your data. What data, Harkirat? The in-memory object that you just saw. The username, password, first name combination of all the users. That's one thing you might want to store separate from the backend servers. The backend server fleet will do all the authentication checks, check JWT, verify, make sure the user is sending the right thing, do a bunch of other things. But if it ever needs data, it will have to hit the database, get back the data, and then, do whatever it wants to do with it and then return it back to the user. So this is a very important primary construct of a full stack application. A full stack application will have the browser, will have the backend servers, we will have a database. There are actually a bunch of other things like load balancers, which we will eventually get to. But for now, this is enough. These three things. Question is, how is the database exposed? What is this database? How does it let the backend server put data here? How does it let the backend server get data from here? How does the backend server know कि हाँ, these are the credentials of the database? Because database is also very hidden. You don't want to expose this to the end user, right? I cannot see Facebook's database. I can only hit Facebook's server, which will check, अच्छा, this is Harkirat, and then it will give me selective data from the database. I cannot go to, I can hit whatever backend server of Facebook I want. I cannot hit any of the database. The database URL, however it is accessed, is secret, and only these guys know it. The backend servers of Facebook know that. The browser does not know that. Cool. Question is, how do you create it? How do you store data? What are the secrets? All these things. So let's discuss that next. All right. In-memory objects are bad for a few reasons. In the real world, your general architecture looks something like this. User hits the backend hits the database. User doesn't have access to the database, cannot talk to the database directly. There are various types of data. Oh, shit, Daisy. Machine seems to be screaming a bit. I guess you guys can see me. If not, Ruki, just call me. All right. There are multiple types of databases. Graph databases, vector databases, SQL databases, NoSQL databases. In today's class, we'll look at one famous NoSQL database called MongoDB, but other ones are sort of popular. Vector databases are popular for machine learning algorithms or like a bunch of things in ML. Graph databases are very specifically used for some niche use cases. SQL databases are used for usually in most full stack applications. That's what bunch of open source projects use. That's what our website app.100xsteps.com uses. And NoSQL is just, a new entrant a few years ago, sort of became popular, still is popular, but most probably any open source project you will look at will use SQL. But for now, for this class, we are focused on NoSQL. NoSQL are much simpler to understand. MongoDB, which is a NoSQL database, lets you create a database. In each database, it lets you create tables or what are called collections. In each table, it lets you dump JSON data. It is schemaless and it scales well and is a decent choice for most use cases. Important things here. Number one, it lets you create multiple databases. You can be like, okay, Facebook has multiple applications, right? It has messenger.com, it has facebook.com, it has instagram.com. So all the data of these three will usually be stored in different databases. A single MongoDB machine, let's say you have a Mac machine where you're storing your, where you're starting your MongoDB server or it's a Linux machine. Every machine will have uh, multiple databases. It's not necessarily a single machine have a single database, and each database also has multiple tables. For example, for an application like Instagram, it needs to have a table where it has user information. It needs to have a table where it has photo information. It needs to have a table where it has friendship information, who is following who, things like these. So multiple tables you will see, and it scales well. It's a decent choice. It's schema-less is important. Okay. MongoDB, you can dump anything. Schema-less basically means you don't have to define the structure of your data. You can put anything in there. It can be a JSON that's very big, JSON that's very small, can have various fields. You can change your schema very quickly. The reason I'm mentioning this upfront is because SQL databases don't let you do that. When we reach SQL, you will see how strictly we have to define our schema. But in NoSQL databases, it's like you can dump whatever data you want there. We will see that very soon. Cool. How to start? Create a MongoDB free instance by going here. Now, this was mentioned as one of the prerequisites for this class or like this week. So hopefully some of you have done it. If you have not done it, it is fine. There are instructions on the website in the prerequisite videos from this week. This is 3.0.7, where you can actually see how to get a free MongoDB instance. Basically, the thing that I was talking about, can you, with your backend servers, you have a database, you can get a free internet deployed database on mongodb.com. If you haven't gotten it now, it's fine. Just follow along for the class, and after the class, try to do it. Get your MongoDB connection URL. This is important. There is a single URL that you can create, which contains your username for your MongoDB, your password, and where to access your MongoDB server, basically a URL similar to like HTTP URLs. And this one long string is enough for you to connect to the database. This one long string is what's usually present on your backend servers. Download MongoDB Compass and try to explore the database. So this is just another sort of software that you can download on your machine, to which you give this MongoDB connection URL as an input, and it lets you explore the database. So let's all do all the three of these things. Hopefully you've done this by now. I have done it as well. So if I go to mongodb.com, it says I should have been signed in already. I'm not. Let me sign in really quickly. Now that I'm signed in here, you will see it says I have one database deployment, which means I have actually deployed a database somewhere out in the world. And it gives me a button called connect. If I click on connect, it says, how do you want to connect to it? Is it using your backend application? Is it using some other way? And as I've said, the way that we are using is going to be Compass, which is basically a software that you can download. So if I search for MongoDB Compass, it shows me this software. Let me close it and reopen it. If you download this, which you can from here, if I go to Compass here, if you click on I don't have MongoDB Compass installed, it'll give you the instructions to install it. Don't have to for this class if you haven't already, it's fine. Once you have installed it, select I have MongoDB Compass installed. It'll give you this long string that you can, that's the string that you need to connect to your database. Now you have to replace username and password with your own created username and password. I created them, which is why if I go to database access, it says I have an admin user and I have the password for this guy, which is why I can connect to it. If you have not created it yet, very easy, created a video already on the platform. You can look at it, how to create your own. I have already created it, and this is my MongoDB URL. If I click on edit here, you all can actually see this URL, which means you can actually go into my database and put data there. This is my long MongoDB URL. There is a protocol at the beginning. Don't worry about it. There is my user that is trying to access this database. This is the password for that user. I can create more users over here if I need to be. I can restrict their access. Yeah, this one can only write, this one can only read, things like these. And then the URL to my specific MongoDB server, which is cluster.0. Some server on AWS where this is deployed. Some extra stuff at the end, don't even worry about it. Click on connect. Now this is my MongoDB cluster. And here, as I said, I can create multiple databases, and each database I can create multiple tables or collections. How do I create a new database? Click on the plus button, create database, give it whatever name. I can give it user_app. This is the app that we are creating, right? Where someone can come sign in and then get the information of all the other users. I have to give a single table inside. Ki, haan, bhai, this specific database has at least one table, which I'll say it has a users table. Create database. And you will see a users app has been added and it has a users database. Here is where I can put my data. The in-memory data that I had, all of this is where it should actually reside. Should I actually import data here? Should I add data here and import all of this? No, I should actually create a new sign up endpoint here where people can come when they go to the sign up page of my website. And from here, data gets put in this database. So that's the next thing we have to do. Given you have created a MongoDB database and you are sure it does exist, does work as expected, I can connect to it via Compass. How can my Node.js process connect to this, and how can it put data in here, get data from here is the next thing we have to do. If we can do that, we understand how to write to databases, how to read from databases, which is pretty much what full stack is, at least backend is. Yeah. From your backend server, you write to the database. From your backend server, you read from the database. Cool. Let's look at the slides. We've done all three of these. If you haven't, don't right now, do it later. after the class. After how does the backend connect to the database is the question. It uses libraries. You can do this without libraries as well if you want, but high level, most of the times you will use some library that will let you connect to your database and write data to your database. Express lets you create HTTP servers. This is one library we have used. JSON Web Tokens lets you create not JETs, JWTs, signed JWTs, verified JWTs. Mongoose is one of many libraries that lets you connect to your database, write data to your database, read data from your database. So let's look at Mongoose next. Let's explore Mongoose to do the next assignment. This is the link to the next assignment. Let me paste it in chat. Try to open that assignment in Replit really quickly. I'm going to do the same. Why did I get logged out from here? 1 second. All right. Create REPL, Node.js, create REPL. And I think REPL is down again. Oh, it isn't. All right. Let's look at this assignment now. What do we have to do again? Let me give a quick recap of what are we building today. What we are building is this. Okay, we have to create the backend logic for a server that is somehow connected to this database. The end user can send one of three requests. Number one, /signup, where they give us a username, password, and a first name. These three fields they give us. And when they do give us these, we have to put them in the database, provided someone with this username doesn't already exist. Okay? That's the first endpoint. Second endpoint, /signin. Our backend needs to check कि हाँ भाई, does this user actually exist in the database? And is their password correct? And if that is the case, we return them back the JWT. Else, stop them, don't allow them. And the third one is /users, where we expect a header where the user sends us the JWT that they got here. We hit the database, get back all the users, return all the users back to the user that's asking for it. Okay? That's a high level of what we have to build today. By building this, we will understand how a backend application can talk to a MongoDB database. Okay? What library are we using? I said we are using Mongoose. So you can actually just go here and look at their documentation. Fairly simple stuff. What does it say here? Let's face it, writing MongoDB validations, casting business logic, boilerplate is a drag. That's why we use Mongoose. Basically, you can do this without Mongoose as well. But Mongoose gives you some extra things. For example, it says MongoDB validation, making sure कि हाँ मतलब as I said, MongoDB is schemaless. So you can literally put anywhere, anything there. But sometimes you want to verify that you are putting a certain format there. For that reason, MongoDB is very useful because MongoDB says that bhai, whenever you're trying to write to the database, first tell me what your model is, what your schema looks like, what is this cat database, what are you expecting to put in there, and only then will I let you, save, which means put the database in the data in there. These many lines of code are enough to write to a MongoDB database. Let's first actually just run this much. Let's not create the whole application. Let's just create a simple code that lets me write to the MongoDB database. Okay? Let's forget about HTTP for a moment. Let me delete everything here. Oh. going to delete everything here. Going to start from fresh. Going to, let me just write everything. Const mongoose equal to require mongoose. This library, I have just imported it here, just like Express. Then I say mongoose dot connect, give the URL of my MongoDB URL, MongoDB database, which was this thing right here. Just paste the whole thing here and replace slash admin with slash whatever your app database is where you want to store, which in my case, let's say it's user app new. These two lines of code. And then I can write mongoose dot create look at the syntax actually. Oh, just going to copy these three things here. What is the first thing it asks me to do? It says, describe the model. What should your table look like? I will have a users table. It will have name, which is a string, username or email, which is a string, and password, which is a string. Thank you, AI. Okay, I have described my user model. Arkirat, why did you have to describe a model? Why can't you simply do mongoose.create or something like that? That's just how Mongoose expects you to first describe. Ki, haan, bhai, this is what my schema looks like. This is what my tables look like. And now you can simply be like, haan, bhai, create a new user. There are other ways to do it as well. But one way to do it is create a new user in memory. So if you don't do this, nothing hits the database. If I just do this, const user equal to new user, name is this, email is something, and password is something. If I don't actually save it, it will not reach the database. But if I call user.save, this will actually put the data into my database. So these many lines of code are enough to put data in your database. Let's run it and see if that is actually true and data actually gets written into a database or not. If we understand this, then what's left is actually exposing this via HTTP, running the saves, running the gets, running the updates via HTTP calls. But if this works, we understand how a backend can talk to a database. That's step one. Step two is HTTP. I find it, create your backend server that actually does this or whatever. All right. I ran it. Let's go to our database. MongoDB Compass going to connect here. Can you see user app new here, which is the same thing that I wrote over here? So MongoDB automatically created a new table for me. Inside created a new users table because I said here, haan bhai, my model is for this users table, and then put my data there, name, email, and password, and automatically created an ID. Don't worry about what this is. Don't worry about what this is. But these three things, was I able to put it inside the database by using just this much code? Seems like it, Harkirat. So can I not do something like this? App.post slash sign up function regress. Yeah, I'll get the username and password from the end user. Const username equal to rec.body.username. Const password equal to rec.body.password. And const name equal to rec.body.name. And just pass these three things here. That will also do the same thing. I have HTTP file putting data inside my server. Cool. But is there a bug here? Can you guess? Hopefully you can. I shouldn't put this data up front. I should first check, does someone with this username already exist? I should actually do a bunch of things. I should actually send the user an email OTP. The user should so that no one can hijack each other's emails. The right way to do it is कि यहाँ पे there is a request that goes out to send the user an email. The user then gets an OTP or clicks on a verification link, and 100 things happen. But assuming people are fine, people are not going to misuse each other's emails. You can expect these three inputs, but you still have to check, does the user with this email already exist? For that, you can be like const existing user equal to user dot find one with this email. So this is another function that you can run, and will probably have this will probably return a promise, so you can just await it. And if user already exists, you can be like, my user already exists. Here is a status code 400. If the user does not exist, is when you actually create the user in memory, save them, and return the end user. User created successfully. Okay. This much is a great start if we understand how we have written the code to expose a simple sign up functionality where it should be any sync function if you're awaiting, but this might not. I might not have to await it. Let's see what the syntax is for finding one. Quick start guide, find one, find. Oh wait, there is no find one function. There is a find one function. All right, cool. Akiyat, how did you come to know there is a find one function? Well, AI helped me here, but even if I did not, I would have gone to the Mongoose documentation, because we have to eventually, there are 4 things you do here. It's called CRUD. You create, you update, you delete, and you create, read. You do 4 things. We have only done creating here. Sorry, 1 second. All right. We have done creating here. We have done reading here. We have not done update and delete, but again, you can just go here. There is like update function that lets you update data, delete function that lets you delete data. But this much do we understand how you can HTTPify a sign up endpoint that, or create a sign up endpoint which does not put data in memory, but actually puts it in a database. In the end, what have we done? We have done, okay, let's actually run this and see if this actually works. And then that might be helpful. What happens when I go to facebook.com basically and I sign up? Create new account. It asks me first name, last name, number or email, password, a bunch of other things. Assuming it only asks me name, number, and password, and I clicked on sign up. These 3 things would go to Facebook server. It would put me in their database and then return me back a response, provided this is a new email. If I already have taken this email, then it won't let me re-sign up, right? That will be a conflict. I can change password, I can take someone else's email, whatever. So that is exactly what we have done here. User can hit this endpoint, send us username, password, and name. If a user already exists, then we will return them back, sorry, 400 status code, username already exists. But if they don't, then control will reach here, user will be created, user will be saved, and we'll say user has been created. Okay, let's try to hit this endpoint and see if it does what it's supposed to do. App is not defined. So const express equal to require express, const app equal to express. Okay. And again, of course, app.use express.json. Run it. And while it runs, let me open chat. This is pretty much it. This is a great start to our assignment. We can add the other endpoints here as well, that, let's say user sign in and let's say user get all the other users, but we'll leave that as an assignment. We'll do it in an offline video. If we understand this much, we understand how to create a backend server that can store data in a database, which is a great start. Okay. Let's do first poll here. How are we doing? How was the speed today? And then we will do more polls. But how's the pace for today? Was this fast? Was this slow? Class is pretty much very close to done. Okay. 30% fast. So don't even worry about it. We will do doubt session after this. And 70% feel free to drop off. This was the class. I'm sure if you understand this, you can HTTP find the other endpoints. For the 30%, I'm going to open chat now, and would be great if you could ask actionable questions around. Let's start here. Let's start with the database stuff. Then we will move to the JWT stuff. Then we will move to the fetch API stuff. Okay. Any questions here on this part would be great. Let me put a checkpoint here. Wow. Okay. I said any questions related to this one, but next week topics will be most probably DOM. I'll cover SQL and a little bit more databases in an offline video. Next week we'll probably start a little bit of front end. So DOM is most probably one of the topics for next week, and then maybe SQL might also be done next week. All right. Find one function, how it works. Great question, sir. Someone said, Harkirat, please explain this. You just wrote it directly. Where does user come from? It comes from MongoDB. And what does it say? It says Mongoose.model something. And we've already connected here. Find one is कि भाई I will go into the database and find one user who follows this constraints कि हाँ email is username. In the end, what is happening here? Someone is hitting your endpoint. They're giving you a username. First thing you have to do is check, does my database actually contain someone with this email? It is similar to me going here on MongoDB, clicking on find and putting a few fields here. Okay, bhai, email is whatever this specific thing. The thing that happens when I click on find here, which actually searches this database and returns me the responses, is the same thing that happens when I call user.find1. The request goes out to MongoDB, does the same thing as this guy is doing, and responds back with a user if there is someone that is following these constraints. If there is no one in the database that is following these constraints, then this will be null, which is why this if check will be missed. But if this is not null, which means there is a user somewhere, then you return back. Okay, that's what find one does. Similarly, there is, user.update, user.delete, which, as the name suggests, delete would let you delete an entry here. So, similar to me clicking on this trash icon right here, the same thing that this does, user.delete would do. And of course, you can pass in constraints to only delete a specific user, things like this. Fetch is an async call and returns some data. We are JSONifying it using response.json, but why are we doing await in front of response.json? Great question. Great question. I was wondering why hasn't someone asked this? They asked, yeah, fetch is whatever, async call. So const res equal to await fetch. Why did we do const JSON equal to await rest.json, Akirat? This isn't an async call, right? This is not sending an HTTP call. Why is this async? Unfortunately, this is async. So you'll have to look at the actual implementation of fetch. Why they made it async? Why they felt there's probably something it's offered into a different thread, or they're just dumb. They return a promise or something. There is a good reason. If this thing is returning, not being able to serialize this data. Yes, probably because when you send a fetch, the format that you get back data in is probably some buffer or some binary data. To convert that binary data to textual JSON, it feels like it can offload some of that to a thread, which is why this does return a promise, even though I can totally sympathize with you and be like, yeah, why this still seems like there's no network call, there's no database call. Why would this be an async call? But it is, which is why you have to put an await here. You have to look at the implementation. You'll have to go to the Node.js code or whatever, the Chromium code, and figure out its implementation. Database is connected throughout. It is. Once you do mongoose.connect, your backend is connected to your database through some sort. Depends, actually. It's not necessary. It's like throughout connected. It might happen, anytime you're doing user.find1, it is creating a new connection and then destroying it. Or sometimes you can have a persistent connection. Unsure which one, Mongoose does here. Could be either of them. JWT, let's explain one more time. Difference between Mongoose and MongoDB library. Great question. I think MongoDB library, let's see what this is. It is a driver for Node.js. So you can think of it this way. This is just pure, let's look at its implementation. Client.connect, client.db, client.collection. I mean, at a high level, you can think of both are doing the same things, but Mongoose actually comes with some, I provide this on top of MongoDB, which is it provides validations, which means okay, you describe the schema before you actually put it in there. Versus here, as you can see, I have not described the schema anywhere. I've just done collection dot documents, and then I can just ask, I can just put anything in there. But if I use Mongoose, it first says, bro, give me your schema, and I will validate if I try to pass some random gibberish here when I'm doing a user, some random field I add, it will provide some validations there. High level, you can use either. In the end, we're not going to use either of these. We will use Prisma, which is the most popular ORM, but high level, these are the differences. Okay. General, what will we be using fetch API in every time until the end of the cohort? Will you teach us how to create an API in this cohort? Well, we just created an API. Thing that we've created is an API. Will we use fetch? Probably, but eventually we'll move to Axios. Hashing a question. Even hashing happens if the leak of data happens. How would other know the leaked password if they be using complex hashing methods? If hashing happens and leak of data happens, people would not be able to know your original password, which is the whole point of hashing it, right? If a hacker reads the database, they will not be able to actually know your password was I love Kiara. They will see some hash. So they won't be able to know it's I love Kiara. So they won't be able to go to, some other platform like Google and log in with harkirat@gmail.com and I love Kiara. Is public key and private key used here in heavy data based applications? Public key and private key not used here for any database logic at all. Is private key linked to system or user? I think you mean, okay, the JWT, where is it? Do you mean this password? And the answer here is it is used. So what's your question? Will JSON tokens get changed every sign in and sign out? Where is JSON JWT stored in the server? Oh, great question. JWT is never stored in the server. The good thing about JWT is you don't have to store it, right? Once you have that long string, if jwt.io, if this guy can decode it without, this much is enough to convert back to this much, what you see on the right. So the server doesn't need to store it anywhere. It just need to check, bhai, this came good, or if this did not came something bad. Doesn't need to store it in a database. This is the reason why JWTs are, preferred so much. You don't have to put data in your database for all the sessions. How to pass token through Postman? Can you show it again? Sure. If you go to Postman, you go to the header section, you go add authorization as the header here, you put the token here. That's how you add it in Postman. Sorry, I missed a few of your questions. How can I send Postman requests from Postman to server builder left? How will we link the server? Yeah, that's what I've been doing, right? So this is Postman. If I go to Replit, this is my Replit program. If I click on play here, and I put a dot 3000 at the end. If I click on play here, and if I where did I have that? If I click on run here, it hosts my application on the internet. I can click on new tab here. It gives me a URL. Whenever this happens, it'll give me a URL here. There you go. Now that I have this URL, I can actually go to Postman, paste this URL, and then go from there. I can put whatever route I want here. I can send whatever body I want. The main point is this URL that you can get by clicking this new tab right here, provided your application is working and it is listening on a port. I want to make the doubt asking system like Facebook comments, then people, same question, like only question can we ask? Oh, someone is asking, how do you make sure only a single question can be asked in Facebook's comment at a time? So this is all application logic on your backend, right? In your backend, you will have some logic that will check the database. Has this user posted something in the last 1 hour? And if they have, you will block them right there. You will have an early return like this. Else you will let them flow and create a post. Will there be offline classes for MongoDB? Yes. MongoDB and SQL will both be covered in offline classes again. JWT again, we'll get to JWT. Why didn't you choose Mongoose or create? Great question. I can. The thing that was on the website. I can totally be like, await user dot create this thing. I don't have to know this. That is totally right. Both of them will do the same. What is the use of JWT password when anyone can see the data on the token? Where does Instagram and Facebook store humans' pictures? Pictures are never stored in a database. They're stored in something called object stores. So Google about S3, and that's where you store files, videos, images. Databases, mein, you just store textual things. And the goal of JWT password is okay, it is what is used to sign the thing. It's like when I write someone a check and everyone can see that signature, right? But the bank server has my original copy using which they can verify. That is what this password does. Anyone can read it, anyone can decode the JWT string back to the original schema. But the server is like, okay, bhai, I know I had signed this using this password. I will verify is this password still valid for this hash? And if that is the case, then only will the control reach here. Otherwise, I will like stop the control. Anyone can create a JWT with this payload, right? The backend server created the JWT with this password. You can write some code on your machine, be like jwt.sign. Where is it? jwt.sign, username, and your own password. So the server can get back any JWT that is signed by someone else. This one is a good question. Let's explain this a little bit further. Okay, what is the goal of using the password if JWT can be decoded by anyone? The answer is, okay, bhai, this for this username Harkirat, this can be hashed into a JWT by me as well on my local machine, by Facebook as well on their machine. These both will still point to this payload. But this one is signed using Facebook's secret. This one is signed using my secret. When I send mine to Facebook server, they will check, was this signed using my password? It wasn't. It will say sorry. But when I send this, the one that was created by Facebook to Facebook server, they will verify, was this signed using our password? Yes. And then it will let it flow. So that's why in JWTs, there is a point of the password, which is to verify. Good question. Will always confuses the first time. Chat. Can we connect to local MongoDB from Replit? No, you cannot. You cannot. Long story. There are ways to do it. Don't do it. How can you complete connection URL? How did you get the complete connection URL? I went to MongoDB Compass. I went to database. I clicked on the connect button right here. It gave me a long string. This string right here. I replace username and password. Everything after it you don't need. The only extra thing you need to add after it is the table that you're trying to, the database that you're trying to access. You don't need the complete thing. You just need, this much. This much is good enough. The app will still work. Why are we making response as await? As we already know, fetch is an async function. Okay, I answered why, response.json needs to be awaited as well. MongoDB servers got breached yesterday. Reliable? God knows. Yeah, this keeps on happening. Every time I log in, a new token is created, or is it because I'm restarting my server? Both. JWT. Where is that function? JWT.sign always generates a new token. That's fine. It's not supposed. It does not follow the constraint. For a given input, it will give the same output. It will give you random outputs. The reason for that is it has this IAT extra field that's added that I was showing here, which I think is some issuance time, the time at which this token was issued, the Unix timestamp of that. I think that is that, or expiry, one of these two. Most probably issuance time. So for that reason, the payload is always different, which is why the thing that is created is always different. Yesterday's notes. Let's see that. Indra Kant has notes from yesterday. Oh, great. Beautiful. Time for a retweet. All right. Is it that these concepts are beginner friendly? That's why you're hurrying to finish them and focus more on advanced concepts that most of the tutorials don't cover? Or do we naturally skip stuff and leave everything for us to learn and stay overwhelmed throughout the class, wondering what is happening? Yeah, this is very slow if I'm being honest, but if this is the first time you're coding, I can get why this can be fast. That said, the goal, at least at the moment, is to can you create a production worthy application as soon as possible? Can you create a backend as soon as possible? If that means skipping, okay, rather than the find one, there is another function here called delete. It is fine. Although I will cover a lot of these in an offline video, but at the same time, little bit of ChatGPT if you use, your life should be fine. But again, we will take feedbacks, and if this feels like really fast, we will figure out other ways. Okay. What is the plan for next 2 weeks? What are we going to learn? Oh, Docker will be a while. Next 2 weeks will probably be front end and then connecting front end and back end DOM. Maybe an intro to React. I'm not sure yet. Most probably not. Felt a little tear to today's class. Will we be needing some more offline classes? Sure. As always, there will be offline classes covering all of these things in the coming week. Why are videos needed to be encrypted? Oh, that's just for piracy control, I guess. Slides will be put alongside the video. SHA is safe to share with colleagues while collaborating. I'm unsure. I don't understand the question, Hardik. What if I don't write a bearer token? How is that different from normal token? So यार वो बस ये है कि tokens can be of various formats. So the reason, a lot of times when you're sending out a header, you send bearer space this thing is because you say, this is like one type of token. There can be, for example, you can be like API-key and then the other thing. So it's just telling this is the format of the token that's coming after me. That's a high level. In our application, as I said, we did not have the first string itself. We just had the token as such. But most places you will see some text up front, which tells what is the type of this token and then the actual token. How would you create multiple backends? Well, you would have multiple processes listening on different ports. For example, if I copy this code base, if I go to Visual Studio Code on my machine, I have an index.js file. I'm going to paste it here. I will create another file here called index2.js. I will paste the same code here. I will make sure it's listing on 3001. Then I can start node index.js in one terminal, node index2.js in other terminal. I have two backends running. What is DynamoDB serverless application? We will get to serverless. We will not get to DynamoDB, but it's basically what's called a serverless database, which means it grows automatically. It charges you per writes and reads versus how normal databases charge you. For example, on MongoDB, you first say if you go to mongodb.com, this is a free server, but if I'm creating one, you specify its size. It will be this much. So you're always paying a fixed cost. Versus in DynamoDB, you say, bro, I don't know how much load I will get. It's a serverless application, which doesn't mean it doesn't have a server. It just means that all that complexity has been given to AWS. You will only be charged for reads and writes. Why do we need databases? Why don't we store data in notepads? Interview question, I got asked this. Great question. 1 second. Let me charge my laptop. That is a great question. In fact, if you might remember, last week's one of the assignments was we don't need a database. Store everything in a file, which is like a notepad, right? If you go to last week's Node.js assignment, there was one called to-do server.js. And here, if you looked at the hard to-do, it was try to save responses in files so that even if you exit the app, you can run it again. Data remains there. Similar to databases. So yahan pe I said, without using a database, store data in a file. What is the problem there? I will give you 10 reasons for this. Okay, what is the problem? But high level, problem number 1, you don't have a standard way to store data. You can decide your own format. I will write it in JSON or some other format. 2, hard to distribute. Most servers are present various places. You'll have like 10, even if you have a single MongoDB server per se, or database, it will be the data will be replicated in 5 different places, so that if one server goes down, you have it in a different place. So files are very hard to distribute. You'll have to rewrite all of that protocol logic that MongoDB has written. Three, I mean, it's hard to say on the top of my. These two are enough, I say, but DBs are optimized for reads and writes. DBs have logic for indexing to make some queries faster. The databases were introduced because people realized that storing in files is dumb. So they do 10 different things that storing in a file won't do, which is why you don't want to store in a notepad. Good interview question. Provide the gist of the code you have just written. Sure. This one right here. There you go. Okay, a few questions together by Ram. Let's see. Let me paste these so you guys can read along as well. Oh. All right. Can you explain more how hashing and encryption are implemented at the code level? Great question. So there are famous algorithms. For hashing and encryption. Good ones are AES 128, SHA-256, which are sort of where people have written, this is how hashing is done one way, this is how encryption is done one way, decryption is done the other way. And then there are libraries in Node. For example, there is one very famous one called Crypto.js that will provide you functions that will let you use these algorithms. So you can simply do like, crypto dot input my string to encrypt dot secret, whatever your secret is. Just call a few functions basically. That will do the one-way conversion and vice versa. Just ChatGPT it will give you some nice, functions that you can use or libraries that you can use for both encryption and decryption or even hashing. How to decide if it is better to encrypt a data for a problem statement? Where encryption and hashing, high level, the difference is if you have to decode your data ever, then you will use encryption. If you don't want to ever decode data, for example, I said passwords. Passwords, whenever you're storing in a database, you don't want anyone can decode it. Mark Zuckerberg does not want any employee of Facebook can come and decode passwords, which is why for that you probably want to hash. For anything like videos, someone said, whenever a video is uploaded to facebook.com, that is probably first encrypted before it reaches their object store, because if there is some employee of theirs who has access to the object store, they don't want them to be able to read them. Is the function to store anything in local storage provided by the browser? Yes, it is actually this function right here called local storage dot set item, where you can give like whatever token, key, and then value. It'll set the item, and then you can do a get item to actually get back the value. Returns this thing. Cool. How is JWT verifying user when, like, what it compares it with while verifying the signature? Well, it just says, okay, bhai, I got back a string const equal to require JSON web token. Const password equal to token equal to JWT dot sign. Name. JWT knows, this specific token was the first goal of JWT is, or this library is to create this token. When it created this token, it said, bro, this token was created / hashed / whatever, signed using this password. Whoever has this token, they can get back this information and they can see it's like a signed JWT string. But whenever I get back this token from wherever, I can do a JWT dot verify to verify कि हाँ, was this token actually hashed by me or by someone else. If you have a checkbook, I can sign on it. My mother can sign on it. Someone else can sign on it, right? If I go to the bank, which one will be accepted? Only the one that was signed by me, right? So I can get back multiple tokens from people who might have signed the same payload using their own password. I will be like, "Bhai, if it was signed by my password, I will let you through, else I won't." That is how verification is happening in JSON Web Tokens. Can we run MongoDB on a local server? Yes, you can. Very clear instructions. You can use Docker for it. You can go to my Docker video on YouTube where I cover exactly this, how you can run MongoDB locally using Docker. Is Mongoose just like an ORM for a NoSQL database? Sort of. It's what's called an ODM, which God knows what the difference is. But yeah, you can say it's an ORM for a database. So user.find1 function will go to users table and match the email keyword. That is correct. I said find one user with this specific conditions. And what were the conditions? The condition was, can find one user whose email is this. I can add multiple constraints here, whose name is this, Harkirat. When I go to Twitter here and search for, Harkirat or whatever, a request goes out, which probably does something like this. Users dot find user who have names similar to Harkirat. So that's what all of these constraints mean. It's like a select star from something where, like a where statement in SQL. Good questions. Chat. Why are we making response await? Oh, okay. I hope I explained why JSON we are awaiting, but once we reach Axios, you wouldn't even worry about it. ChatGPT has the data it's stored in the backend. He gives it to a JSON and stringifies it in the string. How do we solve questions where we have to manually internally and not understand how to take users in ChatGPT has the data it has stored in a backend. He gives it he gives it to us in a JSON after stringifying it in string type. So how does he solve any questions that we have given to him internally and not understand how you can take other users in JWT auth? Kushwant, could you repeat the question? Elaborate it a little bit more. Which is better, SQL, NoSQL, SQL? What algorithm does hashing follows? And if I know the algorithm works, would it be possible to guess the hashed password? It follows, as I said, a few algorithms that are available. They are written by really smart cryptographers and proven in a way that you cannot hash it back even if you know the algorithm is written in a way, it adds a lot of noise to it. So you cannot get back the original string, even if you have read the algorithm. The algorithm proves that this cannot be, decoded. Explain refresh token. Let's wait for this a little bit. Let's understand basic authentication using tokens. Eventually, we can get to access and refresh tokens. Solve using find. Okay, great question. Please explain. Okay. I will do an offline video for Zod and an offline video for refresh and access tokens. Why not use body parser to parse username from body? Oh, I mean, it's just, you can use body parser. No reason. Just picked one. Fetch is an async call, returns using response. Why are we using await in front of response JSON? I hope that's clear. Why we are using await in front of response JSON? Because response.json is an async function. Now, why is it async? Why does converting a string into JSON need to be async is a different question. But yeah, it is async, which is why we are awaiting it. Why is it async? We will have to read through, the implementation of fetch to understand. Why didn't you use mongo.create? I think I just did. How does Twitter Discord handle so many requests without delay? Well, few reasons. I mean, that's the high level question of how you build a distributed, scalable chat application. How does Facebook do it? How does Instagram do it? So they have 1,000 backend servers all around the world. They have, the databases are replicated, very big machines. And in the end, like all of these websites have to support some metric, right? Yeah, they are getting 1 million requests a second or 10 million requests a second. So you basically introduce as much amount of compute to do it. Please recap this in Replit. I will recap everything, Abhi. Let me just go through questions first. So if I create a to-do list, that's it for a database and store anything instead of in memory. Yes, if you're getting a to-do list, you should store it in a database, not in memory. How browsers ensure security of access tokens while storing it locally? They don't. So as you just saw, okay, it can be in the local storage. There are ways through which you either encrypt these things before you put them in the database, or you store them in cookies, which are much harder to read. But at a high level, they're just there. As you saw, like you can go to websites, go to local storage and find some, shady things there. Browsers can do nothing about it. We have to store JWT or refresh token in cookies, right? Or in memory and send bearer token. Please clarify. Different websites use different things. Yes. So there are a few ways in which you can, store this token. You can either store them in what are called cookies, or you can store them in like local storage and then explicitly send this back as a header in every request. Header. So that depends on whether you or not you want to use cookies or headers. Why would you want to use one over the other? Cookies are slightly more secure because users have to set the cookie, and it's harder to pull it out from the browser. Much easier to pull it out. Much easier to pull out local storage. But the benefit of local storage, or explicitly sending this back in every fetch request, if you use local storage, so you have to literally every time you're sending a fetch request, you have to be like whatever the URL is, comma, headers, authorization, bearer, space, local storage dot get item token. So you literally have to do all of this logic, but still people do it because not every device supports cookies. Like mobile makes very hard to do cookies. There might be I don't know, a machine. Like there are various clients, which could be browser. Like cookies are very browser specific thing. Yeah, there are some extra things it provides you. You don't have to explicitly, store it in local storage. It automatically gets stored somewhere, things like these. For which reason cookies are slightly better for browsers. But if your backend only supports cookie-based auth, then, becomes very hard when you create a mobile app, which is why a lot of people just, say, okay, bhai, explicitly give me an authorization header. And, whenever you're sending a fetch request, set it up explicitly by getting the cookie from here or whatever the header, the token from here. There are, and again, every website does different. Some websites have multiple ways to do authentication. This will also work, cookie will also work. So yeah, it depends on your backend. There's a lot of discussion with storing JWT in cookies or in memory. I personally use cookies with CSS protection because that's another industry standard. The industry standard high level is it's very opinionated, depends on. So I was working at an exchange, which should probably be, industry standard. If it's an exchange, it needs to be very secure. Over there, we did not use cookies. We did use a token like this, but before we put it in, no, actually we did. I totally forgot. But before we put it inside the local storage, we were encrypting it somehow. And the finally encrypted thing that was stored, you can't just copy it and go to a different browser and paste it, and it'll, just work for you. So at a high level, that's the reason why, like you can. Industry standard just depends on the company. If I'm being honest, like, company may whatever they think is the right thing to do. Uh, what? How does JSON website able to decrypt our web token without knowing JWT password? Well, it did know the JWT password. Whenever it was written over here at the top, right? So it did know the JWT password. Oh, JSON website. You mean this website? हाँ तो वही है ना. I said this a few times. Okay, you don't need this password to decode. Anyone can decode this without the password. You need the password to verify. Anytime you write when we were at the slides of JWT, what did I say? I said signature can only be verified using the password. Anyone can see the output given the signature. You don't need the password. Anyone can see the output given the signature, but it can only be verified given the password. What is username? Username in JW.sign. It is what I want to sign. If I doesn't have to be username. It could totally be, JWT.sign name Harkiran. It depends on what you want to sign. In our case, we said, okay, bhai, let's sign, or let's, convert the username into a string so that in any future request, when we get back the string, we can get back the username because that was what it was hashed with, and we can figure out whether or not the user is logged in. But you can put anything in there. Why are we using res.json instead of res.send? You can use anything. It's fine. You can use res.send and send JSON data. Is it good practice to create a single endpoint to create or update data using find and update instead of user.save? Sure. I mean, usually there are different endpoints. Sign up is a different endpoint. Sign in is a different endpoint. How to expire an old JWT token so it cannot be used against later? Yeah. So there's an expiry in this function only somewhere. So like it's some arguments. One of the arguments here is expiry. I'm pretty sure that is the case. Algorithm. When you're signing, you can pass it somewhere, or you can be like, expires at new date, not get time plus 3600. So anytime you're verifying, you will check it has expired at passed. And if it has passed, then you will, ignore that verification. So you can either do this, but I'm pretty sure this provides you like one of the arguments here is expires, like some expiry, and then you can give whatever duration you want there, and then signature verification would fail after that time has passed. MongoDB server got reached reliable. It should be working on the user app now, which database we created and table user. Why did it create a new user app table? Oh, because that's what I sent here. I created the database called user underscore app. I did not tell it put data in user underscore app. Now, if I tell it, then it will put it here. I gave it a new database. It automatically created the new database. Where the class is over, by the way. I'm just going to answer a few questions and then everything else will be offline videos. How to expire GWT? Answered that. All righty, guys. Opening chat again. I'm trying to call the ChatGPT API with Postman email with bearer token. I copied using curl. I got some clients challenge change that. Why? Because they're smart. A company like ChatGPT knows developers like you do things like these. So it might be adding some extra things on top. It might be creating some one-time token whenever it's sending out the request. So when you copy and put it in Postman, it knows you're doing something fishy. Why haven't we created schema in MongoDB? Oh, because it is schema-less, as I said. I mean, we have created something here. Yeah, this is what the schema looks like. It has a name, an email, and password. But MongoDB is schema-less. You don't have to describe, it has an email string or whatever. What is JWT password in the get endpoint? What is that JWT password in the get endpoint? Oh, I had described it at the top. So if you go here, the top JWT password, this thing right here. Now I have created a random one. This is the thing that you use to both sign JWT password and verify JWT password. So this password is your, basically someone's signing a check and it goes to a verification machine whenever you submit that check in a bank. That verification machine is this. This is that password that you encrypt and decrypt. Not encrypt and decrypt, but you get the idea. Like sign and verify using. Can you explain DB schema with two users following each other? Oh, in MongoDB, it will be a new table called following. And then, that'll be like user one, user two, and the time at which they followed the other person, I guess that will be the schema. Are you going to offline videos? I will get offline videos this week on middlewares, JWT, MongoDB, at least, and more maybe. And SQL most probably. Why we schema in Mongoose if the MongoDB is no SQL? Great question. Because Mongoose library says we provide you some extra validations on top. If you give me this schema, I will verify that on the client itself, you are not able to put something extra there. So it's just one of the things that this library provides you. Is it better or more preferred to SQL over no SQL? SQL is more preferred. All right, I will create extra videos. Don't you worry about it. This concept will take time to grasp. Yeah, it'll. I mean, yes, but again, now the good thing is you just have to keep going and do whatever we have done until now. We just have to repeat now. Create a lot of applications. You can now create backend applications. Next week we'll try to do a little bit of front end, and then you are at a good state to start creating production-worthy, scalable applications. So as you practice more, it will be a little bit helpful. Trying to call chat. Okay, I answered that. Why does NoSQL scale and SQL doesn't? Well, that's not true. Both scale. In fact, SQL scales slightly more, but at a high level. For most applications, both scale, but at a very big scale is when you see issues with NoSQL. If we are going to use Mongoose, which needs to define schema, why can't we use SQL directly? Well, you don't have to use Mongoose. Two, you can easily update the schema here versus in SQL, you have to do migrations on your database when you update the schema, things like these. Here, just change it here and you're good to go. And also, like this is one of the benefits of Mongoose. It lets you do slight schema validation on the client. But the thing is, this is client validation. I can still go to MongoDB database and actually, put whatever I want there. This is just before I put it in the database, I'll do validations. Does not mean you still cannot, put random data in there. You still can. When will we start real world projects? In a while is all I will say, because we're going slow here, and this is overwhelming. Then real world projects will going to be really overwhelming. JW is not stored in the database, so is the password of the user visible in the database? JW2 is not stored in the database. Password, from what we have built until now, it is visible in the database. As you can see, it says password 1234556. So before storing the password, you should hash it, but we will get to it in an offline video. What if we used two long-range devices the same day? How does the tokens verified? Well, you have two different tokens. Both of them are valid. You are logged in two different places. A better question is, how do we make sure only one session is allowed at a time? And in this case, you have to introduce a database where you put all the sessions, and if there is already a session, you break the old session, introduce new sessions like this. Trying to answer that. How does JWT verification actually work with secret pass? How does? So yeah, verification on JWT.verify. There's also a function called JWT.decode that will decode this token into the original object without the password. Verify, the name itself says, verify, has this token been signed using this password? That is what verify does. Decode only takes token as an input, will give you still the same output. But that is for decoding. Anyone can decode. Verification requires JWT password. We use JWT password to decode token on a server, but then how did you decode your ChatGPT token without JWT password? I can decode this also without this, but I cannot verify it. That's the difference between decoding it and verifying it. What function am I calling here? Verify. If I call decode here, then there is a problem. Anyone else can, hash the same payload or create a JWT for the same payload, and I will let them through. But verify only stops the tokens that were signed using this password, which is why I do verification here. Doesn't Bitcoin mining solve hashed codes? Does it mean hash codes can be decrypted? No, they cannot. And who said Bitcoin? It doesn't do that exactly. It does do what you're saying, but there are, depending on the number of zeros in the beginning, it's slightly easier to solve that problem. And that is why people say as compute becomes easier and easier to do, the number of zeros will be increased. So you still cannot, unless you have, of course, if there is a supercomputer, it will be able to, unhash a hash, but that is a few years down the line. Is JWT passwords unique for every user? No, there's a global single JWT password, not unique for every user. Someone sent to meet someone at 9:30 at 10 here, but let's see. Okay. Client server, this is the flow. Client sends the username and password. Server checks against the database record. If the match is created, first signature using this thing, secret, then token using this thing. Server sends back the token to the client. The client sends the request to access certain URL with the token in the header. Server decodes header in the payload, uses secret to create another digital signature compared to choice. This might be how JWT works under the hood, is what Karthik might have pasted here. Unsure. But yeah, I'm going to paste it here if anyone wants to read. Okay, answer that. Can we create middleware for checking if user exists already? Exactly. Yes. Not for this use case, but for authentication, we should. 1 second, guys. Do we have other ways to connect DB from apart from driver and ORM? Yeah, you can understand how the protocol works, create your own driver. You have libraries like Prisma that are core ORMs. Yeah, there are 10 different ways to connect to a database. Are JWT password always hard coded? Not exactly, but yeah, yeah, you could say that. Yes, for most practical purposes, yes. They're hard coded, but they're not hard coded in the code base. They actually come from some environment variables that get injected here. through some secret management, which we will get to when we get to. But yeah, they're not hard coded in the data in the code base usually. When will we start? Okay, so that offline videos seem better than online class, but I said videos feels sleepy. Okay, thank you. Good feedback. If Mongoose helps create a schema model, then why use MongoDB? As I said, the schema model only for client-side stuff. MongoDB is still schemaless. You can still put random data in there. That does not follow the schema. Okay, I'll create a JWT offline video. Let me take. Shiva, I've read your comment. It says explain JWT tokens in depth. Why can't tokens change from time to time if they're just being created? Likewise, privacy is maintained if the token is stolen. Also, please provide links to all the Discord and great class, understood everything in one go. Hey, please read this class. I developed a model for fine tuning as well. Want to deploy the model in different users. Oh, okay. Shiva, ping Rookie and let's get you on WhatsApp. Will we create database and image video in this course? Database with images and video in this course. At some point, I can introduce S3 if you want, but it wasn't part of the original curriculum. We can talk if need be. Is Passport.js better than JWT? So Passport.js under the hood also uses JWT if you give it that specific strategy. Is JWT vulnerable? No, everyone's using it, so it's not vulnerable. It is just if you need to implement it right, and then you're fine. Does async tasks look for other threads? I mean, is that why it runs as a multi-thread? So yeah, usually async tasks are being either awaited, which means something is happening that's happening on the kernel, which means it is happening on a different thread. And that is why it's sort of high level. Yes, you can say it's sort of multi-threaded. How does JWT require password for both encryption and verification? Only at the moment for verification. So how does JWT require password for both encryption and verification, or only at the time of verification? It requires password during creating the token and during verifying it, does not require it during decoding it. You will have said you will use ChatGPT with JWT, but it also needs to verify password. Okay, you said we can use ChatGPT with JWT, but it also needs to verify with password. So how can we use it? Not exactly. So the applications that we will create in the weeks to come, वहाँ पे try this. वहाँ पे go to the local storage, or try to pull the header from one user, put it in another user, and it will just work. You'll be able to steal someone else's token. ChatGPT will have 10 different checks to avoid this. But yeah. Can you remember JWT functions and arguments? It accepts, please. Yeah, sure. JWT at a high level, 3 functions it has. JWT.sign, which the first argument is what you want to sign. Second argument is the password using which you want to sign. JWT.decode, which just takes the JWT as an input, returns you back the decoded data as an output. Probably have to await it, maybe not. And then the last one is JWT.verify, which takes your JWT string and also this password that you used to actually encrypt it. These are the 3 functions you need to know about. What is the difference between this and this? This does the same thing that this website does. There is a reason why this website can convert this to this, because JWTs can be decoded by anyone. They can only be verified by someone who has the password. These are the 3 high-level functions you need to know about. Cool. If authorization token is used to identify user, can you do anything to prevent it if someone else gets the token and send request? Yeah, there are ways to do this basically. If your token gets leaked, as I said, one way to do it is the token is encrypted in a way it has some device signature of yours. So if you copy this and give it to someone else, even if they paste it in their browser, the JW, the local decoding logic will fail, and it will not work on a different device. That's one way. Other way is you can always revoke these keys. If you know someone has stolen it, there are ways to revoke keys on the back end. In that case, you have to store these tokens in a database. So high level, there are ways to do it, but in the end, it is considered as the user's fault if the user opened their laptop, kept it open, and then someone else came and stole their cookies. You can try 10 different hacks to prevent it. But if someone really wants to steal it, even on Facebook and Instagram today, there are ways to do it. Why? Okay, so that explain cookies and session. So yeah, offline video. Take a screenshot. JWT uses hashing or encryption. Nothing. It is a third thing. It's like it's what's called a digital signature. High level doesn't use either. Why user.find one only use await? Why is the promise? Why is it a promise when we are only filtering? While we are getting the data and filtering, we are not saying कि भाई user.find one these user list isn't present in this backend. We are asking the database कि भाई from all the users you have, can you give me one that this user has? Which is why it needs to be awaited. How does forget password work using JWT? Very long question. I'll give a brief answer. Whenever someone clicks on forget password, you create a new token for them, a JWT for them. कि हाँ, this user, जिसमें the fields are type forgot password and then these things, and this token reaches their email, and then they click on that email link through which that token reaches our backend, and then you let them change their password. All right, we use JWT password decode on a server, but how did we decode it on to answer that, right? You can decode it anywhere. I did not use the password when I did jwt.decode. I never did this only. I used the password when I did jwt.verify. This function requires the password. This function does not. Given a JWT string, you can decode it anywhere. What if the server goes down? Will the JWT be remembered? The token is showed, yes, it will. So that's the thing, right? It's sort of stateless. You never store it somewhere after generating it. Given the string, it can be decoded and verified, irrespective of if the server went down. All right. Someone asked how was my experience at GatherTown? It was good. Only the company sort of tanked. Uh, all right, guys. Going to have to pause it here. I have to meet someone at 10 p.m. They haven't messaged back, so maybe not actually. But we'll do a few offline videos. Interesting that we're getting overwhelmed here because I'm this part because then React is going to be a cliffhanger, guys. If this part is, I'm hoping this marinates and gets better because this is difficult. React is just going to blow your heads. So let's try to do a lot of offline videos where I cover this even more simply. This part and then DOM are the two big things that we should have complete grasp on before we even open React. So let's do a bunch of offline videos. TAs are there. Let's try to do more doubt solving using you during live sessions and then maybe covering a lot of syllabus during live classes, something like that. We'll figure it out. But thank you for joining. I have to call it here. But we'll see you guys next week and we'll post a lot of offline videos. Sorry if I cannot take more questions right now. Thanks, guys. Bye.